The first time Eleanor noticed something was wrong, it was barely a flicker of awareness. A trick of the light, she told herself. She had been standing in the bathroom drying her hands when she glanced up at the mirror and saw herself. Nothing unusual about that, except for the small, nagging detail that made her stomach tighten. Her reflection was wearing the wrong clothes. She had gone to bed in a loose gray t-shirt, but the woman in the mirror was wrapped in a white tank top, something she hadn't worn in years. Her hands froze, damp fingers hovering over the sink as her mind worked to make sense of what she was seeing. The image staring back at her had the same face, the same wary blue eyes, but the details were undeniably off. She blinked rapidly, expecting the illusion to correct itself. Maybe she was more tired than she realized. The soft glow of the bathroom light buzzed overhead, casting long, sluggish shadows. The air felt heavy, thick with the scent of soap and something faintly metallic. A deep breath. When she looked again, everything was normal. Her reflection matched her perfectly, from the shirt she was wearing to the slight furrow in her brow. Eleanor let out a small laugh, shaking her head. She was being ridiculous. She had probably just imagined it, the way people sometimes think they see movement in their peripheral vision. It was easy to let the mind play tricks, especially when exhaustion weighed down every thought. Still, she left the bathroom with an uneasy feeling, the kind that clung to the edges of her consciousness like cobwebs. Days passed, and she forgot about the incident. Life went on as usual. Work, coffee, the endless scroll of social media, the soft hum of the television keeping her company in the evenings. But then it happened again. This time, she was in her bedroom, running a brush through her hair in front of the full-length mirror. It was late, well past midnight, and the house was silent except for the occasional creak of settling wood. She turned to grab a hair tie from the nightstand. When she looked back, her reflection was a fraction of a second behind. The brush slipped from her fingers, landing on the carpet with a muted thud. Her breath hitched. It had been so subtle that if she had blinked at the wrong moment, she would have missed it. But she hadn't blinked. She had seen it clearly, her reflection hesitating, a half-second delay between her movements and the mirror's response. She stepped closer, pressing her palm against the cool glass. Nothing happened. Her reflection mirrored her perfectly now, her wide eyes, the rise and fall of her chest. She lingered for a moment, searching for any sign of something unnatural, but the glass only showed what it was supposed to show. Her own mind was betraying her. That was the only explanation. Maybe she was stressed. Work had been demanding lately, and the long hours were starting to take a toll. She told herself it was nothing, just her imagination. But as the days passed, the feeling of unease grew. She started avoiding mirrors, an irrational fear twisting in her stomach every time she caught sight of her reflection. It was ridiculous, of course, but some primal part of her whispered warnings she couldn't ignore. She brushed her teeth without looking up. She dressed in the mornings with her eyes carefully averted. And then, one night, she made a mistake. She woke up in the middle of the night, her throat dry, the room impossibly silent, the kind of silence that felt too still, too deliberate. She sat up, running a hand through her hair, her heart beating sluggishly in the quiet. The glow of the street lamp outside cast faint, shifting shadows across the walls. Her bedside clock read 3:12 a.m. She wasn't sure what compelled her to do it, but she turned her head, gaze landing on the full-length mirror across the room. and her reflection was already sitting up. Her pulse slammed against her ribs, ice filling her veins as she stared, unable to move, unable to breathe. The woman in the mirror was watching her, and she was smiling. Eleanor couldn't move. Her muscles were locked in place. Her breath caught somewhere between her chest and throat. The woman in the mirror, her reflection, sat perfectly still, her head tilted at an unnatural angle. That smile, too wide, too knowing, stretched across her face like a wound. For a long moment, the air in the room felt heavy, thick like oil coating her lungs. Then, slowly, the reflection lifted her hand. Eleanor didn't move. She didn't raise her own hand, but the woman in the mirror did. Her fingers curled, nails scraping lightly against the glass, and Eleanor swore she heard it, an almost imperceptible sound, like fingernails dragging over a smooth surface. The noise sent a sickening chill down her spine. She scrambled out of bed, her legs shaky beneath her. Her gaze darted away from the mirror, but she could feel the weight of it pressing against her, an oppressive presence in the room. Her heart pounded in her ears, loud enough to drown out everything else. She wasn't imagining it. She knew she wasn't. This wasn't stress, wasn't exhaustion. Something was wrong. The reflection had moved before she did. She forced herself to look again. The mirror was empty. She saw her room, her bed, the dim glow from the streetlight outside. But she wasn't there. Her reflection was gone. A sharp, suffocating panic took hold of her chest. She reached out with a trembling hand, fingers hovering just above the glass. It was cold as it always had been, smooth and solid, normal. But she wasn't in it. She took a step back, her pulse hammering so hard she thought she might pass out. Then, movement, not in the mirror, but behind her. She spun around, breath catching in her throat. The room was empty. The silence pressed down on her, thick and unbearable. She could hear the blood rushing in her ears, the sound of her own breathing, shallow and uneven. But there was nothing there. Swallowing hard, she turned back to the mirror, half expecting to see something else, something wrong. But her reflection had returned, and now she was perfectly in sync. Eleanor staggered back, her knees almost giving out beneath her. She needed to get out of this room. She needed to get out of this house. The next morning, she avoided the mirror completely. She dressed quickly, not caring if her shirt was inside out, barely pausing to glance at her reflection in the bathroom as she brushed her teeth. She left the house without looking back. At work, things felt normal. The office was the same as always. Phones ringing, people shuffling past her desk, the smell of burnt coffee lingering in the air. She told herself it had all been a bad dream. Sleep paralysis, maybe. It had to be something like that. But the feeling never left her. That creeping sensation, like she was being watched, the weight of unseen eyes pressing against her back. She caught herself glancing at reflective surfaces too often. Shop windows, the elevator doors, the screen of her phone. Every time, she braced herself for something to be wrong. And then, 3 days later, it happened again. She was brushing her hair in the bathroom, her movements slow and careful. She hadn't meant to look up, but her eyes flickered toward the mirror. Her reflection was watching her, not moving, not brushing her hair, just standing there, staring. The brush clattered into the sink as she stumbled back, her breath coming in short, shallow gasps. The woman in the mirror did not stumble. She stayed perfectly still. Eleanor squeezed her eyes shut, willing it away. When she opened them, the reflection was normal again. Her stomach twisted violently, She rushed to the toilet, barely making it in time before she vomited, her body trembling from the force of it. The acidic taste burned her throat, tears stinging at the corners of her eyes. She couldn't stay here. She spent that night at a friend's place, though she didn't explain why. She told them she just needed a change of scenery, needed a break. They didn't question it. There were no mirrors in the guest room. For the first time in days, she slept without interruption, but she couldn't avoid it forever. When she returned home, the apartment felt different. The air was heavier, the rooms quieter in a way that made her skin crawl. It was as if the house was holding its breath, waiting for her. She avoided the mirrors. She moved through the rooms carefully, deliberately keeping her gaze averted. She knew something was wrong. She didn't need to see it to feel it. But then, one night as she passed the hallway mirror, something caught her attention. A movement, a flicker of motion, just at the edge of her vision. Her breath hitched, slowly, against every instinct screaming at her not to. She turned her head. Her reflection wasn't moving. It was standing completely still. Too still. Her hands were at her sides, fingers curled into tense fists. But in the mirror they hung loosely, relaxed. The reflection was watching her. And then, it moved. Not in time with her, not mirroring her actions. It took a step forward. She did not. A strangled noise escaped her throat as she stumbled back, her heel catching on the rug. She fell hard, pain jolting through her spine as she hit the floor. From this angle, she couldn't see the mirror. She didn't want to. Something was wrong. Something was horribly, impossibly wrong. The air around her felt thick, charged, like the moment before a lightning strike. She forced herself to her feet, barely aware of how unsteady she was. She had to get out of here. But as she turned to leave, she caught a glimpse of the mirror. Her reflection was gone. Not frozen, not moving independently, just gone. A strangled whimper caught in her throat. Her hands trembled at her sides. She could hear her own breath, shallow and uneven. And then, from the mirror, a sound, a whisper. She didn't understand the words, but she understood the intent. And she ran. She didn't stop. She didn't look back. She didn't notice that just before she fled the apartment, the reflection had returned, and it was smiling. Eleanor woke to silence, a thick, suffocating stillness pressing down on her like a weight. Her bed felt strange, cold. The sheets had an odd texture, too smooth, too flat. The air smelled different, lacking the usual scent of her home. There was no faint aroma of old coffee, no lingering traces of the perfume she always sprayed before bed. Something was wrong. Her eyes flickered open, and for a moment, her mind refused to process what she was seeing. She wasn't in her bedroom. She was standing. Standing, but also not standing, because the world before her looked off. Everything was muted, blurred, like she was seeing through a layer of fog. The furniture in her room was there, but distant. The walls were shadowed, their edges hazy. The door, her escape, seemed further away than it should have been. Her breath hitched. She turned instinctively, and her stomach lurched, because on the other side of the glass, in the dim glow of the real world, she saw herself, lying in bed, her own sleeping form still beneath the covers, chest rising and falling in the slow, steady rhythm of someone deep in slumber. The soft glow of the bedside lamp painted warm light over her face. Eleanor's mind reeled, her thoughts scrambling over themselves, trying to make sense of something that could not, should not be real. She was inside the mirror. No, this was a dream, a nightmare. Any second now she'd wake up, heart pounding, skin slick with sweat, and she'd tell herself it was all in her head. But her reflection, her real body, was still there. And then she moved. The Eleanor in the bed stirred, shifted, and then she sat up, slowly, deliberately, and when she turned her head, she was looking directly at the mirror, directly at Eleanor. Eleanor tried to scream. No sound came out. The woman, her reflection, her imposter, tilted her head slightly, as if studying her. Then, that same slow, sickening smile stretched across her lips, and she raised a hand. A wave, mocking. Eleanor stumbled back, but there was nowhere to go. The world behind her was a void, a pale, endless nothingness stretching infinitely beyond the edges of the glass. She turned back, slamming her fists against the surface, but it didn't give. The woman in her bed watched her with something almost amused in her gaze. Then, without breaking eye contact, she stood up. She stretched, rolling her shoulders, as if settling into her new body. Then she turned toward the door and walked out of the room. Eleanor pounded on the glass harder, her hands stinging with the force of it. No! Her voice, trapped in the mirror, was swallowed by silence. She couldn't hear anything, not the distant hum of the city outside, not the creak of floorboards as the thing wearing her body moved through her home. The world inside the mirror was empty, hollow, a twisted, inverted version of the real world. The realization hit her with a force that stole the breath from her lungs. She was trapped in the place where reflections lived, and something else had taken her place. Time became meaningless. She didn't know how long she screamed, how long she clawed at the surface of the glass, how long she begged for something, anything, to let her out. But no one could hear her. No one could see her. Because in the real world, Eleanor was still there, smiling, living, pretending, and she was gone, forever.